This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by Language Blend, the new best way to learn Spanish. Language Blend focuses on what you actually need to live and get by abroad with daily one-on-one lessons, a dedicated texting partner. It's like living in a Spanish-speaking country without ever leaving home. Go to languageblend.com for more information. Welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. My guest today is Mikel from Natural Language Learning. He speaks 12 different languages and he'll help you learn a language in 3 months or less. Mikel, how's it going?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Where are you calling in from today?
I'm in San Sebastian, Spain.
Very cool. So you're in Spain. I'm also actually in Europe. I'm in Italy. So we're on, I guess, the same time zone.
Yeah, we are. For some weird reason, Spain has the Central European time, which makes no sense. But yeah, we are in the same time.
Indeed. How are you liking it up there? So that's near Bilbao?
Yeah, that's the Basque Country near the between Bilbao and the border with France. And I very much like it here because it's my hometown. So I've traveled quite a lot. I've lived abroad in several places: Romania, Germany, Austria, and a bunch of other places. But I always end up returning here because I live next to the beach. It's really nice. It's got everything I love. So as much as I like traveling, yeah, my hometown. There are very few places that beat it.
Yeah, I've definitely heard it's one of people's favorite cities in Spain. Okay, so Mikel, let's get right to it. How many languages do you speak?
Um, okay, so my bio says 12 because it looks good, but probably more because I keep learning new ones all the time. I'm currently learning Arabic and Greek because, well, I've got business partners who are Moroccan, so I'm learning Moroccan Arabic. And after that, I guess I will learn Standard Arabic. And I'm also learning Greek now to go for my next holiday. But yeah, I guess well, like 12ish, and then 14, 15 if you count the ones that I can like kind of have a conversation but not really all that well.
Yeah, we'll come back to that because it is a tough question to answer because, what is fluency? So we'll come back to that. But I wanted to provide a little bit of sort of continuity with the podcast and the Twitter for the audience out there. So I first heard about you, Mikel, through Atlas. So Atlas on Twitter, a lot of people will probably know him. His handle is at Dentist Leo. It's like a lion icon. Atlas is pretty big. He's a Moroccan guy. Is he? Or do you do business with him? When you said you had Moroccan partners?
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about. And even before that, I was learning Moroccan Arabic because I've got some friends. Obviously, I'm in Spain, right? We've got a big Moroccan community here. So if there's one language that really makes sense to learn, is Moroccan Arabic. But yeah, I know Atlas. I don't know if he considers me a friend, but we get along really well. Yeah.
Yeah. He hasn't guested on the podcast yet. For anyone asking themselves if he has and they missed the episode, but we've gone back and forth on Twitter a bit, and he's a cool guy. Um, and so when he gave you an endorsement, he tweeted out some stuff like Mikel's the guy for language learning. I was like, you know what, that's good enough because because we haven't had a dedicated episode yet where we talk about language learning. And I wanted to kind of have a dedicated episode to sort of walk through some of the philosophies around language learning, how to learn a language, and basically just inspire people. Because for me, one of the main reasons that I wanted to go abroad many years ago, when before when I was still back in Canada, USA, was one of my main inspirations was I wanted to learn languages. And I was watching, Tim Ferriss, and he was all about language learning. I was watching Benny Lewis, Fluent in 3 Months.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're probably familiar with Benny. And so those guys kind of,
With both of them, yeah.
yeah, so those guys kind of inspired me. And yeah, that's kind of what we're gonna talk a bit about today. How's that sound?
So you've learned Spanish, right?
Yeah.
Anything else? Portuguese, maybe? Or...
Portuguese pretty good. I would say conversational, and French.
Okay.
So those are the kind of the ones I'm on doing the romance languages. Doing a little bit of Italian here in Italy, but I'm not taking it too seriously because I'm not here for too long, and it's just too much romance language in my brain for right now. 'Cause
I mean, I can see how some people might mix them up, but also once you learn one of them, the others are quite easy, right? Because it's kind of the same thing, you just pronounce differently or with some slight variations.
they're easy and you'll be able to read it, but it's definitely also a little bit confusing. Like even when I try to speak French now, I'm just so used to speaking Spanish that I start accidentally saying Spanish words in my French. Like I'll say, even just today, I met some French people on this tour we did, and I was like I accidentally said muy instead of très, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it uses the same part of the brain.
Have you ever tried Romanian?
I have not. I mean, I've looked
Uh,
at it just from kind of watching the Tate Brothers, and
okay.
I'll like go watch like their like they'll be on like Romanian TV or whatever, and I'll watch those clips on YouTube, and I'll pay attention to the Romanian and kind of see how much I can read and pick up. But I've never given it like a real go.
I strongly recommend visiting Romania. It's a really, really cool place. Been there many times. And the language, if you speak French or Italian or Spanish, it's quite easy. It looks exotic, but it's not that different because it's Latin.
Yeah, we'll get back to you, but also just for the record, I have dabbled a little bit in Russian and Arabic and in Chinese, so I can like sort of read the Russian Cyrillic and stuff like that. So I think that's something I want to eventually, progress more on. In terms of like speaking the six, I think of it as speaking the six languages of the UN. There's six official languages of the United Nations. It's French, Spanish, English, Arabic, Chinese, Russian. So I thought that would always be kind of cool. Um, but anyway, so back to you. So give us a little bit of your background. So you grew up in the Basque territory of Spain, and just give us
Hmm.
like the 60-second background. I imagine you kind of grew up bilingual or
Yeah.
trilingual, and then you kind of took it from there.
Bilingual because I mean Basque is my native language. I'm a native level speaker as well of Spanish. Obviously, I'm a Spanish citizen, but in my village, I come from a small village. Everyone speaks Basque, and I learned Spanish later in life. Uh, Trilingual is hard. I mean, it's hard to say because we all learn English here in school, but most of us. I was very lucky to meet international students in uni. So, I mean, my degree, I studied tourism in university. I was young and dumb and chose a degree that was completely useless, except for the fact that I met people who I could practice English with, and later French and German as well. But apart from that, most people don't, even after like 8, even 10 years of classes, they don't speak English well here in Spain. It's kind of sad and also really weird. It's huge waste of taxpayer money and time. But anyway, yeah. So grew up bilingual, learned English mostly speaking to foreigners, and later on, obviously, in the internet. Like watching stuff, playing video games, reading. And after that, I had some classes of French and German, improved German more because I met Germans. My French was never good, even after 4 years of classes. Again, classes don't really work all that well. Moved to Germany, later to Austria. Survived there for a while, even though my German wasn't good. Came back to Spain. And yeah, I've been doing all kinds of language related work since then. I've been a translator, I've been a language teacher at first, and later on, I worked for the Spanish embassy in Germany. Um, and the German Romanian Chamber of Commerce as well. That's after I learned Romanian. But yeah, I ended up like people started asking me for help because they were trying to learn languages and they were failing. And I started giving people advice. And at some point, someone asked me, like, why, Emma, why you don't charge people for this? Because you're good at this. And I was like, okay, let's try. And yeah, a couple of years later, I just quit my job and doing this full time.
That's awesome. So basically, you're a guy who grew up in Spain, Basque, Spanish, a little bit of French. You moved to Germany, learned German. Um, and then when did you kind of realize that you were like exceptionally good at languages, or how did the translation stuff come about? Just kind of German to Spanish and vice versa, or
While living in Germany, I think, because when I moved there, I had already taken classes, but I went there, tried to get a job. I couldn't because my German was not good enough to speak to people, uh, like to understand what people were telling me to do at work. So I got fired several times. This is years ago. I mean, now it's fun to remember, but it really wasn't fun then because when you're abroad, you're broke and you don't know anyone. It's really not a good situation to be in. Um, but yeah, I realized I was really good at languages. I mean, I was really good at English then, but my German got good just by interacting with people. You know, if you have to speak it all day,
hmm
and you watch TV and you read and stuff, at at some point you end up developing good skills. You know, like the best way to improve your comprehension is to read and listen to the language a lot. And even though I wasn't aware of that then, I was doing it just by being there.
yeah, yeah, makes sense. And then how did you get from the four European languages that are all pretty close by to jumping up to 12 languages?
Um, I did a bunch of stuff. When I was living in Berlin, I was living in East Berlin, which used to be the communist area and still inhabited by a lot of people from the Eastern Bloc, lots of Russians, Moldovans, Romanians, Ukrainians, and neighbors from all over the place. And I started talking to them, and so I started learning Russian. Um, because I was already interested in learning languages, and Russian's a cool language, so I was like, yeah, okay, let's learn Russian. And then I realized there were also like some Romanians and Moldovans who speak also Romanian, and I started talking to them as well. And yeah, next thing was just like I was learning every minute I wasn't at work. I was just learning languages the whole time, either hanging out with people who spoke the language I was learning, or uh, reading at home a lot, or watching stuff, or even like I had a whole hour. The commuting was a big part of my day because I spent 2 hours a day commuting, and that was also all of it dedicated to language learning. So I
hmm
was learning languages like maybe 5 6 hours a day.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Now
but
let's try to tilt things in a way that where anyone listening to this can get as much tips and value out of this as possible. Um, and so I guess building on what you said like, oh, I just started speaking with people. Well, that's a big barrier for a lot of people to start speaking in a language that they don't know. How would you kind of, if someone does have that kind of scenario, maybe they work with a couple Romanian guys, maybe you know what I mean? They work with a couple people from a different country and they want to learn a bit of that language. What do you do? Are you kind of, you're saying like, are you saying to yourself like, oh, I have this opportunity, I'm going to go home and study the language on my own, and then when I go into work, I'm going to start saying how are you and stuff like that, and kind of build it up from there? Or how do you, like, you know what I mean? How do you practically start doing it?
Um, look, I didn't come up with the system I currently use, the natural language learning system, overnight. It took years of uh, trial and error and trying different things and see what works and what doesn't. And right now, what we do is preparing scripts. Scripts work really, really well. So if you make a list of all the stuff that you're likely to say,
Mm,
or all these situations or conversations that you're likely to have in the language, and for each one of them, you prepare a list of sentences that you'd like to say and answers to questions you think you'll get, and then you translate it all and you memorize them with good pronunciation. You practice saying them. That's a very good starting point to become conversational quickly. Because if you've got a couple hundred sentences for the most common situations, like introducing yourself or asking for something or ordering in a bar or restaurant, that kind of stuff, that will allow you to keep the conversation going so they interact more with you. So you're forced to say more stuff because the problem often when you start learning is that you really don't have much to say, and at first thinking a language is very slow at first when you don't know enough. So what it often happens is that conversation just ends up dying down, and you either switch to English or they stop talking to you. So to avoid that, like if you've got a nice list of sentences ready, I mean, it does sound like, oh, using a script, and that's like sounds really fake, and not really. I mean, uh, eventually the goal would be to go off the script, and it doesn't mean that you are going to say all like always the same stuff in the same order.
hmm.
But having a list of memorized sentences to use anytime you need them is really, really powerful.
Yeah, that makes sense. I actually I totally resonate with this because I remember I think it was Tim Ferriss that originally said, learn your bio down cold in the language. So he said, let's just say it's Spanish, you learn like, yo soy Vance, yo soy de Estados Unidos, blah, blah, blah. And you learn your bio. Tengo 10 hermanos, whatever it is, right? So you learn your bio, these things that people are going to ask you, things about
Yeah,
yourself. And so you learn your bio, and then after you said a bunch of sentences about your bio, people are like, "Wow, like your Spanish is very good," and you're like, "No, I just learned my bio."
yeah.
And so so that's kind of what you're saying is like the bio is like one script, and then what might be some other very common scripts?
Your work is another one, especially if you're self-employed and you wanna
Mm,
convince them to pay you for something. That's a good one. Any kind of logistical situation. I mean, like airport, one for the airport, one for the plane, one for public transport, another one for a taxi, and then bars, restaurants, or any kind of like. Not only like what are your hobbies? And my hobbies are this, and that. No. Like for each one of your hobbies, you should have a long list of things you can say, so that you can actually have a conversation. Basically, the more topics, the longer the list of topics that you've prepared, the better. It's work, but it really pays off.
interesting. Any more, or like what are your go-to scripts? The first scripts that you learn in a new language?
The ones I just mentioned, because afterwards, what I do these days is memorize a lot of vocabulary, and I mean a lot. So just by doing those basic scripts, um, I mean, I've got more scripts also, and I use them with my clients. But for myself, not I don't use that many of them because I figured out how to memorize a lot of vocabulary. It takes practice. Um, I visualize and associate words, and they really you make them stick, and you don't forget them. And then if you are reading and listening a lot, all those words that you visualized, you will understand them when you read them and you listen to them. So that way you can very quickly uh, improve your comprehension, and with that, eventually you're speaking without having to memorize too many of these scripts.
And is the script both sides of the conversation? Is it what you're saying and what you might expect the other person to say? They'll be like, "Wow, no way,"
Uh, y-
stuff like that.
yeah, because you know why? That also gives you the tools to respond to them. If you learn like, oh, that's interesting, or what do you think about this, and I disagree with that, and if you learn all those expressions, then you can also use them yourself when the other person is talking.
Okay. Okay. So scripts are good. Scripts are good. Um, what are some? I don't know if we're doing this in order, but like, what are some of the most powerful tools that you employ to learn a language in 3 months and to help your clients learn a language in 3 months? So we got scripts. What are some of the other big ones?
Scripts is one of the big ones. Another one is it's called mnemonics, mnemonic devices. It's the
Yep.
visualizing and associating. That's for uh, fast memorization of vocabulary. Is really really powerful, but it takes practice to get good at it, and especially you need to be creative. It takes a lot of you need to get good at visualizing things, and a lot of people they're not creative enough, and it takes a lot of effort, and they just get frustrated and they can't do it. But if you're good at it, and there are especially like in the online entrepreneur sphere, people are good. They tend to be good at it. Not everyone, but because they're used to thinking outside the box, and they're used to they're creative people, right? So for that kind of people, yeah, it's really powerful because you can, instead of like 5 words a day, 10 words a day, just by repetition, like with the traditional system, you can potentially memorize hundreds of words a day if you get good at it and you do it in a disciplined way. So that's mnemonics is really powerful. Another one obviously is inputs, and the inputs is a big one. Inputs, reading and listening. You should do a lot of it. Uh, Without a lot of reading and listening, and especially listening, uh, it's really hard to improve your comprehension and your speaking as well. Because the other two, um, scripts will help you. Scripts will help you start a conversation and keep a conversation going for a while, but they won't improve your comprehension, right? And memorizing vocabulary will be really useful, but if you're not used to then using that vocabulary in context, there's something that is missing, right? Then you have to form a sentence, and even if you know the words, you will be really slow at thinking the sentences and then saying it, or you will not. Uh, you'll understand the words, but not the tense, maybe. So mnemonic devices are really good to memorize a lot of vocab, and then that's going to be useful to do a lot more reading and listening because you know the words already, so that then you end up learning the pronunciation by listening a lot, um, grammar as well by reading and listening a lot. Just by sheer repetition you learn it all. But the three things are this, like it's I don't know if like the holy trinity of language learning. I don't know how to call it, but um, yeah, the mnemonic devices, input, reading and listening, and then the scripts. And with those three, you can get really good at it really quickly if you do all three.
Okay.
And and then the last thing, obviously, you need to speak, right? But um, speaking can be improved again quickly if you use scripts, and then you do things like reading aloud, or shadowing, or listening and repeating. But the one last tool that you could use if you want to get, let's say you want to get really really good, like you want to speak with barely no mistakes, uh, barely any mistakes, then translation is the thing to do. Once your level is pretty high and you understand everything and you can talk fluently, but you want to like troubleshoot your
Hmm.
language skills, then you translate. You take a text in the language, you translate it into your language, and then back, and compare it with the original, and you correct it. And that's
That sounds
uh,
like work.
it's a lot of work, but It is. You could do it in speaking as well. You could take a bilingual text and just by looking at the English, try to say it in Spanish, and then you look at the original. And if you said it correctly, then great. If not, then you read aloud from the original, like the correct way. And then the next day you try again. It's This is a lot of work and it's repetitive and it's difficult, but it's really effective to uh, identify and fix all the mistakes that you might be making. This is for advanced levels, though. Like the for beginners, again, use scripts, a lot of reading, a lot of listening, and mnemonic devices. If you learn how to do them properly, this is difficult. It's a difficult technique, but it can be really useful.
Hey guys, quick break from the episode to tell you about BitRefill. BitRefill allows you to shop online and in person without banks, converting your crypto directly into merchant balance. We're talking gift cards to Nike, Amazon, Apple, Airbnb, Hotels.com, and many more, all paid for with crypto. BitRefill offers more than 10,000 gift card options in 180 countries, including the USA, Canada, all across Latin America, including Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, El Salvador, and many more. You can also apply the code MyLatinLife at checkout to get 10% back on your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. So reading and listening, easy enough. Find a newspaper, pick up some podcasts. I want to run through each of these three elements of the trifecta and just figure out how to implement these kind of as quickly and easily as possible. So
Okay.
reading and listening, I guess, podcasts, radio, reading. Would you include maybe Netflix with that?
Yeah. What I would do is uh, audio and subtitles both in the same language, in the language that you're learning.
Agreed. We were
So
talking about this on Twitter.
yeah, so you listen and read at the same time.
Exactly. Because if you do it in English or your native language, it's just going to be a crutch and you're almost going to zone out the audio.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's really hard to. I mean, you wouldn't improve at all. I think by doing that. I mean, well, maybe you would because you know what? There are some countries in Europe, like in Spain, we dub everything, right? Like everything's dubbed like, and the dubbing is terrible as well. But like, I can't nowadays. I watch everything in English. I can't really enjoy watching it with the Spanish dubbing. But in Portugal or the Netherlands or in the Scandinavian countries, they watch everything with subtitles. Uh, Always, they never like everything's in original language, and they tend to be way better than Spaniards or Italians or even Germans at English. So maybe it does work to a certain extent, but I would put the subtitles and the audio both in the language that you're learning.
Okay, cool. And then any other secret best ways to develop your reading and listening?
For listening, it's just to keep doing it. Just have it on and be comfortable. Like, be okay with not understanding everything. This is a big one. People get stressed sometimes. It just maybe make sure that the voices. Make sure that you like the voices, the way that people, like the people you're listening to talk, and that you like the topic, and that's it. Maybe you have to listen to it twice or three times. You can have it on while you do something else. I go for runs, I work out, I cook my meals, I do a bunch of stuff. I drive as well while listening to learning material or podcasts. But just be okay with not understanding everything. It's not like you shouldn't stress about it. Just get used to it, and it will only get easier. And same thing for reading. Um, for reading nowadays, we've got really good tools online. There's a plugin called I'm Translator.
What's that
Uh,
again?
it's called I'm Translator.
What's the word you're saying? Can you spell it?
I'm Translator.
I am?
Yeah, but with a like I'm Translator.
But like I am translator?
Yeah. exactly.
Okay. Okay.
It's a plugin for Chrome, and it allows you to turn any text into a bilingual text. So if you go to a news website of, I mean, you could use it on Twitter as well. You click on anything, and it will translate the text without substituting it. So you'll get the original text, and below it you'll get the translation. So it's really good to try to read. Let's say you learn Spanish. You try to read in Spanish, and then below it you've got the translation without having to copy it and paste it on Google Translate. So it's in the same website, so it's much nicer looking, and you, yeah, so you much more immersed, and it's a much better experience in general, and you can go sentence by sentence with it, and it's really really useful, and people don't know about it, and it's free.
Yeah, that's cool. There's definitely a lot of crazy Chrome extensions out there.
There's a lot of good stuff out there that's
Yeah.
free. Like we all love to complain about stuff. But we've got Chat GPT. We've got like lots of Chrome extensions and stuff. Like,
Hmm. Okay,
we've got a lot of good.
let's run through the tooling relatively fast, and we'll get through the rest of the trifecta, and then maybe we'll move on to some other concepts in the language learning sphere. So, okay, so audio reading, we kind of got that covered a bit. Um, the scripts, like, where would someone get those scripts? You know what I mean? Like, let's just say I start learning a new language, like they're not necessarily out there. Am I paying someone to develop these scripts? Should I just get them on Google Translate? Like, what are we doing here?
I mean, my clients get them from me, and they get.
You're
Uh,
selling too hard, bro. No, I'm
yeah,
joking.
the hardest part is coming up with ideas, right? And I what I always tell my clients is to like use their own words and create their own text. So they they make a list of the sentences they'd like to say, and then I translate it all into Spanish for them. But I give them the scripts I've got already from previous clients, and I mean, not exactly. Like, there's no confidential information there, but like the main idea, so that they have something to work with. Because coming up with okay, what should I say in that situation? It's not that easy. It takes some work, but mostly it's just a matter of okay, where, with whom, and about what will I be talking about, and then uh, and and then just writing a list of things you would say. And the easiest thing to do is to look back on previous conversations you've had in English and just replicate them and then translate them. Or um, if they are conversations you haven't had yet but you'd like to have, then imagine what you would like to say.
Yeah, makes
Again,
sense. So, like, is Google
it's
Translate
work.
a decent thing where you just sort of type out all the things you need, like "Hi, 2 train tickets, please," blah blah blah, and just put that in Google Translate, and or
It is good enough for this, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because um, Google Translate is accurate enough because and think about it. If you're a beginner in a language, um, you're going to be making mistakes anyway, right? So as long as it makes sense what you're saying, uh, even if Google Translate made like a mistake every 1,000 sentences, um, it's still the amount of mistakes is still much smaller than the amount of mistakes you'll make in real life conversation. So it's not that big of a deal.
yeah. Okay,
Does that
makes
make
sense.
sense?
Yeah, so scripts were good, and then the third thing is the mnemonics. Like, I know there's things like Anki and a couple apps out there where they'll like show you pictures with the words and stuff. Or what are some good ways that people can incorporate the mnemonics and visual memorization stuff into their language learning?
Okay, so I'll give you an example. This things like Anki, I'm not a big fan of, except if you. I mean, space repetition is good, but normally vocabulary without context is not easy to remember. Um, but you could make Anki better by using mnemonics. And I'll give you an example of how to do it. So let's say, llamar is to call in Spanish, right?
Yep.
So how do you memorize that? Because obviously it's not logical. It's like in English, there's nothing that says, for an English thinking brain, llamar has nothing to do with calling. So you have to associate them somehow. So the best thing to do is find a word that kind of looks or sounds like llamar. And I'm gonna say, how do you pronounce it in English? By the way,
A
is it
llama.
llama? Yeah, the
Yeah, so
animal.
it'd be like a picture of a llama with a telephone or something.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yep,
Can you visualize it?
I
Like,
can visualize it.
have you seen those in real life?
Have I seen a llama?
Yeah, they're from South America, right?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess there's different types. Anyway.
But I think and they spit on you as well. I think. Yeah, 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 really. But can you visualize one of those like calling with a phone?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Then if you do that, even if you didn't know that llamar is to call, you after that you would probably remember it, and you would remember it for a few days, maybe not for a month. But the key here is to do a lot of reading and listening. So then eventually you'll see the word again in context, and you will remember what it meant. You won't remember if you don't see it again for months, but if it keeps showing up, then yeah.
For
So
sure. Yeah, my mom used to say if you use a word 5 times in a day, you'll remember it.
I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on the person. There's quite a lot of science on how many times you need to see a word in context to remember it in a foreign language, things like that. I've heard 10 before, but I mean, it really depends on the person, I think, and how difficult the word itself is. You know.
True, true. Do you have any other funny mnemonic examples from Spanish?
Um, Not that I can think of right now, but the best way of doing it is just getting a piece of paper with a text in front of you and looking at the words, and every word you don't know, you just highlight
Right.
it, and later you use mnemonics on them.
So should people invent their own mnemonics? Because that does kind of take some time to like think it up and all that. Or
Oh,
is there a system out there? Is there like a product or a software that you recommend that's just like full of mnemonics?
you should create your own,
Okay.
and you should create your own, and also you should use places and people that you know. Like, uh, it should always be a word that sounds kind of like the word you're learning, right? So, um, but for a longer word, it's really hard to find something in your language that sounds similar. So then you break it up into two or more words, or a full sentence. And for that, you can use you can use names of people that sound similar to that word. So you can easily visualize those people because they're people you know. And then the other thing would be the this like the little story you do between, yeah, the llama is calling, uh, the llama's on its phone and stuff. Like, that's weird, right? That's not something you see every day. So the weirdness, it makes it more likely that you will remember it. So it if the if the visualized association has some kind of either shock value or something that's, I mean, for the most part, sex and violence work really well, or something really weird that doesn't make sense, or it's just like weird. Those things are much more likely to be remembered. And if it's vivid and there's movement as well. If it's just like something that you see every day, then obviously it's not memorable. This is why there will be days in your life that you like. What were you doing exactly a year ago? Like the 6th of June. 6th of June last year. You probably don't know, right? Unless something like special happened that day. But if something special happened that day, or something like something weird happened, or something either good or bad, you will probably remember even what you ate or like what you were wearing, and you'll remember stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, this works the same way. If the associations something out of the ordinary, then you will remember it. Otherwise, no.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, I think we've covered mnemonics a fair bit. What else should we get into? I wanted to know if there. How do you think about like there being an upper limit to the number of languages that you can learn? As we were kind of talking about early on in the episode, I'm already confusing things at 3, 4 languages. Admittedly, they're all in the same language family, but I'm already confusing things. And I find that having studied a lot of the great language learners of all time, be it I think it's Mezzofanti, the famous cardinal, and maybe you've followed some of these guys, that some people have gotten up to like 30 languages, things like that. But there is but it's largely a work of memorization, it seems, and it's a use it or lose it type of situation. And um, how do you think about like an upper limit or and maintaining languages? Because I think those two things go together.
In your case, are you more or less at the same level in all three Latin languages? Probably not, right?
French and Spanish pretty close, and then
Yeah.
Portuguese a fair bit behind.
And do you spend a similar amount of time in contact with both languages?
Well, keep in mind I'm a semi-anonymous figure, so I've actually never gone into this too much. But I learned French first, having lived in Montreal a number of years. Um, I didn't grow up in Quebec, so I didn't grow up in a Spanish in a French speaking environment. But then when I moved to Montreal, I did learn French, and I learned it pretty well. Like I learned it pretty damn well. Um, all things considered. And that was kind of my first foreign language. And then I started Spanish after my French was already like solid, like years in the making. And then I've been doing pretty much just Spanish for a number of years, and then introduced Portuguese sort of more recently after Spanish was already solid. Because I had, like I said, like I'd studied a lot of these guys and studied a lot of the language gurus, and they all said don't learn multiple languages at the same time. Or if you do, choose two different languages from totally different language families so there's no chance of mixing it up. So I guess my philosophy was always to kind of get one solidified before moving on to the next one.
Um, I do disagree with that last point. I think, and I know people who learn that way. Like, okay, and I'm gonna do 6 months of this one, and then the next 6 months I'm gonna do this other language, and they just focus on one. But the problem with that is, I mean, if you study intensively, you can get to a very high level in 6 months. But then, if you spend the next 6 months studying something else full time, and you don't pay any attention to the language you just learned, you're probably going to get rusty at that one.
For sure.
So I think it would be better to do a little bit of everything. Maybe not at the beginning, but once you have a good understanding of how the language works, um, just get exposed to it regularly, to all of them, all the languages that you speak.
Right, right,
So
right. So I put my French in maintenance mode where I don't really speak it all that much because I'm just not in French speaking countries much. But I still listen to podcasts in French quite a bit and try to listen to like maybe 3 to 5 hours a week, maybe realistically 3 hours a week of French podcasts. I listen to some comedy podcasts and some history podcasts. And so I keep it up because I know you got to keep it up or you're going to lose it. Um, but that's that's like listening comprehension, and I find the speech still gets rusty because the phrases don't come to mind super fast. But at least you definitely, there is an element of language learning where you absolutely need to maintain it sort of week over week or month over month, or it will go away.
Yeah, that's what you're doing with that. That's good. If you're listening to it regularly, maybe you'll be a little bit rusty when you have to speak it again after many months. But after a while, like after half an hour of conversation, you will get into French mode again, I think. And the other thing you could do is to read aloud once in a while, just
Hmm.
once a week, twice a week, just something you're reading or something that's interesting, just 5-10 minutes of reading aloud, and that already makes a huge difference if you do it regularly.
That's true. That's like the thing about the reading out loud is it feels like work to me because I would never do that normally.
For me at this stage, it's like a sort of meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you work online and you do like you've got your own business and you're like constantly, I mean, trying not to multitask, but you're always working and you've got a bunch of different projects at the same time that you need to work on, and just like switch the laptop off and grab a book and read aloud for 10-15 minutes, and like just one thing, and I'm just concentrating on one thing only, and I'm saying things aloud. It's just like I can do it slowly as well, and yeah, it just relaxes me.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm weird.
And so to answer the original question, like, do you think that there's an upper limit on the number of languages that someone can learn? Probably largely due to just the memorization aspect or like mental capacity.
Um, do you?
It's a good question.
Because I had honestly I never thought about that, and you know if there is, I'd rather think there isn't, because I don't want to have limiting beliefs. And that guy you mentioned
Ooh,
earlier,
that's deep.
Italian sounding name, is that some guy from the Middle Ages, right?
Yeah, it's like early 1800s, I think. You never heard of this guy? He's like known as like the number one of all time.
1800s. I thought it was from.
Mezzofanti. Let me look this up.
Um,
Giuseppe Mezzofanti, Italian cardinal, 1744 to 1849, was a famed hyper polyglot. Blah blah blah. You guys can look it up. It's on Wikipedia.
he translated Bibles, I think, right?
Yeah,
Or something. Yeah, I've heard something. Like if those guys could do it, I mean, we've got the internet. We've got you know we can, as long as you try really hard and you keep working on it and you're consistent. I don't think there's I don't want to think there's a limit, at least. And there are some people like have you watched videos of what's the guy, Richard Simcott?
yes, yeah. I've watched a lot of these guys. I think Richard, though he's not. It's been a while. There was a period where I was like more into the hyper polyglot type guys, and it's been a little while. Like there was the black guy that spoke Chinese, who I guess passed away. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Lao
yeah,
Shu,
yeah,
Lao Sher,
yeah.
Lao Sher. Uh, a lot of these guys.
That guy did. I think that guy did exactly what I was talking about in the beginning. Just use scripts, like prepare the conversation.
Moses
Uh,
McCormick is his real name.
oh yeah, he surprised like Koreans and Vietnamese people and stuff in restaurants. That's good use of scripts. Like that guy didn't. I mean, uh, I don't know what his real level was in most of the languages, but and I don't speak Korean or Japanese or Chinese, but you could tell for some of them that it's just like he learned some memorized some scripts and used them really effectively. So
Mhm.
scripts. In fact, I got the idea from his videos years ago.
Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. Quick break from the podcast to tell you about Language Blend, the best new way to learn Spanish. Language Blend was co founded by Jake Nomada, friend of the podcast, decade of experience in Latin America. And Jake and his team, they put everything into this program that they wish they had in terms of how to level up quickly with your Spanish language skills. Because the faster that you can get conversationally fluent in Spanish, the better the experience that you're going to have in Latin America. So go to languageblend.com for more information. That's cool. And so, what do you think's keeping people from becoming hyperpolyglots? Because I think everyone respects the idea of speaking three
Do we
plus
need
languages.
to be? As long as you speak good English, like everyone should learn good English. Without good English nowadays, people who speak English as a second language, you're very limited, professionally and also personally to a certain extent. But do we need? I mean, if you like traveling, and yeah, personally, yeah, you'll be a more interesting person, and your experiences abroad will be better if you speak. Like, try going to Romania as an English speaker, or try going to Romania as someone who speaks decent Romanian. Like the way, like your experience will be completely different. And the same for Latin America if you speak Spanish. But apart from that, like, does it really? Uh, except for people like you and me, right? Like, oh, the audience here as well. I guess they're in the market as well. But for most people, that they just like work the 9 to 5, and no, I don't think they. I mean, I'd recommend them
I think
learn
what's
languages.
cool. I think what's cool about learning languages. Sorry to interrupt, but I think what's cool is that it's something that you can really learn in your downtime. Like when you're at the gym, you can just listen to it. When you're waiting for the bus, you can read an article or do some Duolingo or look at some flashcards. But really, you can just sort of like listen to it passively when you have to watch a movie to relax. Just watch it in a foreign language, things like that. So I
Yeah.
think I think it's just like a skill that you can add on the side without it taking away from any of your other objectives in life.
Oh yeah. It's that plus then you get to learn a lot by other cultures, right?
For sure.
It's not only because if you're learning through inputs by reading and listening, um, you end up consuming a lot of content from that specific culture. So you end up learning
True.
a lot about those people. So those people, that sounds very bad.
No,
But
I get it. I get it. Like that
uh,
culture. No, because like when I learned French, I started learning about not just France and Quebec, but I also started learning a lot about all the other French speaking cultures in the world. So I started learning a lot about West Africa. I started learning a lot about North Africa, you know, things like that. And so learning their music,
same
stuff
with
like
Spanish, right?
same with Spanish, of course. You when you learn Spanish, you don't just learn about the country that you're in. It's literally 100% guaranteed that you're going to learn about every country in Latin America. I don't care if you only want to live in Argentina, you only want to speak the Argentine accent, you're going to just naturally end up learning about all of Latin America
Uh,
and
wh-
Spain.
where have you been in Latin America, by the way? Like, did you
Uh,
live there? Yeah, right.
yeah, I've been to a lot of places.
Okay.
Spent some time in Spain as well.
Hmm.
So I think it's like natural. Like you start when you learn Chinese, like by the end of it, you're gonna be like you're not just learning the language. You would just sort of by definition be an expert on Chinese culture at the end of it. You'd be able to know the difference between this province and that province, and the north and the south, and the food here is different than the food there. It just kind of comes with it.
Yeah, and it's kind of another part. You develop another part of your personality, right? Sometimes you even change the way you speak. Like, I don't sound the same in Spanish as in English, and in German I sound a different way because I use German mostly in other circumstances, and I sound different in my native Basque. I sound different, and it just not only sound different in the sense of I don't mean the accent, but I mean the kind of person you are. You know, like your personality changes from language to language. I think that's my opinion. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I've definitely heard people say that. For me, I wouldn't say overly, but I don't know. It's not
I
always.
don't want to, I don't want you to think I'm some sort of multiple personality having
No, I know everyone says that.
like.
Everyone says that. I don't really feel like it's the case with me, but I've definitely heard that a lot. Definitely heard that a lot. Um, cool. Where were we? Where were we?
Languages. How many can you learn? Yeah, I think infinite would be a good answer. Like, as
That's
long as you,
interesting. That's a good take. That's a good
like, I
take.
mean, as long as you have the time, right, and the energy.
Do you think it's fair to say that the only reason people don't learn languages is because they're just not putting in the effort? Do you think it's inevitable that if you listen to, X amount of audio and you read X amount of pages, you read X amount of words, that it's just inevitable that you'll learn the language? Are there other limitations, or is effort and number of hours like really the only limitation?
Um, Contact with the language, as I would say. There are ways of making it more efficient and faster, right? So things like mnemonics will make you learn way quicker. But uh, if you spend hundreds of hours watching content in a language, I mean, if you listen to Chinese all day and you really don't know a single word, a year from now you will still not know a single word because it's just noise, right? But um, if you watching stuff, so this video, and you associate the sounds with action and with images and with things that that you've seen, you will end up like making sense of what they're saying eventually.
Yeah. Like I've heard some hyperpolyglots talk about active versus passive listening.
Um, what would I think? I know what you're talking about, but I'm not sure. So you mean active as of you're just sitting down and listening and doing nothing else, and passive just having it like playing it in the background?
Yeah,
Or
it's interesting. It's hard to define, but it's sort of like level of concentration on
okay.
listening, because sometimes when I'm in the gym and I'm listening to podcasts in Spanish or whatever, sometimes I'm like really following the story and like truly listening to the Spanish. And sometimes I'm like half listening to it and
Mhm.
half like thinking about, something else.
Yeah. That happens to everyone, including myself. That's I think that's inevitable. I think it's better to listen to more, to listen to it for longer and sometimes just like zone out, than to listen to it in a really super focused way for short periods of time, because then you just limit it to that time, right?
Mm.
If you zone in and out, at least you get this a practice, and if you do it for 3 hours or an hour, I mean, you're still getting a lot of it. And even if you're not really paying attention, I think your subconscious kind of still, and it kind of still learns by just being exposed to it. I'm not gonna go into listening while you sleep and things like that, which I've heard people do that. I wouldn't try that, but
Interesting. So you think longer periods of time of passive listening is actually overall better than a shorter period of focused listening?
I think I would combine the two.
Yeah.
So maybe, especially in the beginning when you're learning a language, reading while listening. So the same text, you read the script, or like you read the subtitles, and while you watch something, so you're listening and reading the exact same thing. That's the best way to do focused, like intensive listening at first, but that gets old very quickly. So uh, combining that with a lot of passive listening is the best way to go, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Speaking of that, I had another question. So now that you're basically maintaining 12 languages, or maybe it's 8 languages or something, right, that you're actively maintaining, how do you compartmentalize your time? How do you split up your time in terms of making sure that you're maintaining all of them? Do you have a specific day for certain languages, or do you try to mix several languages on the same day? How do you think about that?
I am in contact with most of the languages almost every day. Not because I schedule certain amount of time per language, but more like I've got a list of content for each language that I read or listen to, and depending on how I feel, like once the work day is over and my actual learning, like serious learning is over, in the evening, like I just gonna chill, so I just watch something or read something or listen to something, depending on what I want to do at that very moment. And I got a long list of things that in different languages. So maybe I neglect some of them sometimes if I've got less content for those. But uh, for the most part, I think I touch all of them. I think I touch all languages every week just by reading, listening, and watching interesting stuff without any kind of planning. Just having a list of things to
Yeah.
do.
Like what I try to do with the podcast is have have the queue set up that it's like a different language every subsequent episode. So it'll be like 20 minutes of French, and then 20 minutes of Spanish, and then 20 minutes of Portuguese, and then maybe 20 minutes of English, and have
Can
that
you?
in a rotation.
But you've automated that.
So, well, it's not automated, but it's like, you have a queue in the player of like what episode, like all your downloads and like what comes next,
Oh, okay.
and you can sort of manually just rearrange them. And so I just arrange them in a way where I try to make sure that I get like a little bit of each language every day.
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it. But I think if neither of the languages is a priority, just listening to and if you've got interesting content in each one of the languages, just listening to whatever you feel like listening is good enough. I think.
Yeah, fair enough. What are some other common themes around language learning that people come to? Like, where do you think most people have either limiting beliefs, or where you really find that you add the most value?
Uh, the too old thing. That's you
Okay,
know
it's true. That is a common question.
I started learning German at 23 or 4 at university. My friends from the village told me I was too old to start learning German at 23. Uh, yeah, people believe that a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people believe that unless you learn a language, you start learning a language when you're a kid, you can't do it. And it's, I talk about limited beliefs, like that's so wrong. And also it's just and I deal with this kind of stuff every day. But if people listen to me and follow the plan for a week, then they change their mind because they start seeing results. But it is quite frustrating. That's the main one. Like too old, or I don't have a talent for it.
So,
And
when are you too old? 37 plus or minus?
are you 37?
I'm joking.
Um, you know Steve Kaufman.
Yes. He's
How old
Canadian,
is?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he is. How old is he now?
Oh, that dude's got to be at least 60.
60s. He's mid 70s, I think.
Yeah.
Is he's learned most of his languages after retiring. So and he keeps going. No, I think there's no too old. And actually, uh, for older people, I think it's a pretty good mental exercise to learn languages to for mental health.
Yeah, keep the brain young. They've seen. Have you seen those studies where they show a unilingual brain and a bilingual brain, and there's just like way more brain activity in the person
Uh,
that knows more than one
Really?
language?
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's true,
Okay.
and it makes sense. It makes sense because you have your brain is just like working more and in
Does
different
it?
ways.
Honestly, I have like in anything sciencey, I have no idea.
Fair enough.
Not gonna come here and pretend to know things that I don't know now.
So no age, as long as you're mentally fit. No age limit.
No, of course not. You see, you've got living evidence there. You can see old people learning languages and effectively. So
And then another question. I remember Tim Ferriss, I think, would try to answer this too. And all the this is like one of the big questions I think in the language field. Who learns better, children or adults?
that's another one. That's another misconception. Children learn languages better than adults, mostly because they don't have the limiting beliefs that adults have, and they simply don't quit. The children will learn. Like, they keep listening to people and they try to imitate the same way they learn to walk. They learn to talk, and they just keep trying until they get it. While adults, often a lot of them is just they try for a while and they and for a while I mean a few weeks, like maybe a couple of weeks, and then just I'm not good at this, and they just quit. Which uh, when if they had continued learning for a few more weeks, they would have started seeing results. It's just you just have to keep doing it. So I don't think children are inherently better than adults at learning. In fact, adults have adults have advantages that kids don't have because they know about the we know about drama. We know a lot of stuff kids don't know. Kids just
Hmm.
learn by sheer like volume, exposure, and quantity. While we can learn more smartly. So I think actually adults are better at learning.
So you think adults are better?
Adults without limiting beliefs are better at learning
And
than
again,
kids
why is that?
because I mean our brains are fully developed and we know like we know what we're doing. Kids are not. They don't, I mean they don't know what they're doing. They just do. So in a way, a biggest advantage, in a way, a biggest disadvantage, self awareness can be turned into a biggest advantage. Just you just have to keep doing it and not quit.
Self awareness. That's good. What are some of the other misconceptions that you've encountered?
I think those are the main ones. Kids learn better. Yeah, that kids. You have to start as a kid. The kids learn better, and then um, the talent thing. Like I don't have a talent for this.
Talent.
No, just I mean, you can be more or less athletic, but if you if you train some sport for like every day for a few weeks or months, you'll get better at it eventually, right? It's the same thing. Some people, obviously, if you bring me a genius, they learn faster, but anyone can learn.
Okay, I got another one for you, Mikel. People say, I heard this just in the past week. Someone said, I want to raise my daughter in Canada because I want her to have a native English accent. And if I raise her in Mexico, she's not going to
Hmm.
have a native English accent. What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think that there's like a cutoff for accents? Do you think it's possible to reach native level in terms of an accent?
Um, as a so you mean as the daughter of expats or for people in general? Like to you learn language to to a point where you sound like a native speaker.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible to learn a second language to a level where you sound like a native speaker?
Uh, Possible, yeah. Very difficult, and my English is very good, but I don't sound like a native speaker, and I probably never will. I still have, and I used to sound way more like Arnold Schwarzenegger when I used to when I used to live in Germany. I sounded way more like I had a really weird accent then. I sound more native like now, but still, I've got an accent. I make some mistakes here and there. Uh, is it really like the amount of time and effort that it will take you to get to get to that last 1%, from like going to from 99 or 95 to 100%. uh, with that amount of time and effort, you could learn a couple languages to a good decent level, and is it really, do I really want to sound like, I don't know, like an American? uh, it's not that important to me. But I mean, and maybe even if I tried, I wouldn't be able to. I don't know. There are people who do. If you move to a country and you live there, I've never lived in an English speaking country, by the way. If you move to a country and you live there for a few years and you make really like a serious effort to sound like a native, yeah, it's possible. It can be done. I know people who do. I know people who live in Germany who sound German. People who sound British who live in London. But again, it's a long time. It's a lot of work, and again, not everyone can do it.
Hey guys, quick interruption to tell you about Bitrefill. Bitrefill is the best way to convert your crypto into gift card balances. These are gift cards that you can spend at hotels.com, Airbnb, Nike, and many more. You may remember Joel Valenzuela, previous podcast guest. He's been living on crypto exclusively since 2015, and he's a big consumer of Bitrefill. And so I asked Joel, I said, what do you like most about Bitrefill? He said that he likes the instant delivery, the precise amount so that you don't have to juggle a lot of gift cards, and he loves the global selection. Nobody else has this much selection of gift cards, over 10,000 gift card options across hundreds of countries. Go to bitrefill.com to sign up, and you can also use the code MyLatinLife for 10% back off your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. Yeah, because I think some people, like one of the big things for expats in Latin America is they think a lot about their kids and putting them in private schools and just like, raising kids in general. And is this the best environment for kids versus maybe where I grew up or a big city back in the States, blah, blah, blah. And I think one of the, there's many considerations like safety and education in general. But I think one of the big considerations is what is their accent going to be like? And it's like, are they really going to learn English to a native perfect level just kind of from the parents and maybe from tutors? Or are they going to have like some weird Mexican accent when they speak English, that kind of thing?
But are both parents English speaking?
Probably just one in most cases.
But the thing is, if they get exposed to a lot of English speaking media at home, and then one of the parents speaks English to them, we'll probably end up speaking like that, right? Um, Again, I know people with parents from different countries uh, that have a weird accent in both languages. I don't know. It's a very tricky question because the sample size is very small for
Mm.
me to know, and also I know both cases. I know people like born and raised in San Sebastian they sound British. One of the parents is British. I know people born and raised in San Sebastian that they speak really good English, but they sound weird in English and they sound weird in Spanish. and they've got a Spanish parent and a British parent. It really depends on the person, I think, and what they do. But it can be done. If they're exposed to a lot of media again, and then one of the parents at least talks to them in their language. Yeah, I don't see why not.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like,
Are
would
people really that worried about the accent?
yeah, because if you don't have a native accent in English, like that's gonna definitely affect your, your job opportunities and stuff like that.
Maybe, could be. I don't know if I agree with that one, because in this day and age we have a lot of people, really smart people, um, who come from other countries, right? They speak fluent English, but with an accent. So
Yeah, but all else being equal, you'd probably want someone with a more native accent. And then you mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger.
yeah,
And he's an interesting example because he became, governor of California and all this stuff, and very successful in the United States with his accent. And you could probably argue that his accent has actually been an asset and has been valuable to him, and just kind of having like a signature vibe and personality. I think I'm not sure. I'd have to double check on YouTube if there's examples where he pretended to have a native California Native American accent. But like I think Arnold could choose to do a Native American. I don't saying Native American is wrong, but having like a native accent, but he actually chooses to keep his Austrian accent just because obviously he probably feels more comfortable and that kind of thing. But I bet at this point, after like 50 years in California, that he probably could
I
could
think
could talk. You know,
I think he can definitely tone it down, but it's part of the brand. I think.
it is part of the brand. But
Yeah,
someone like that with like 50 years in a foreign country, they can obviously reach like native accent level. I feel.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, but also I have met a lot of people who, after living for decades in a country, they still sound weird. Not only sound weird, but not only the accent's weird, but uh, pronunciation, even grammar's not good, or they've got very limited vocabulary. It really depends on what you practice and if you get feedback. And there are a lot of factors.
There are a lot of factors. Yeah, I have. Yeah, just a anecdote. Like when I was living in Montreal, as I mentioned, and I guess I'm revealing things on this podcast, but there are people that speak English and French at basically a native level, like they're basically natively bilingual in Montreal, and they can switch like mid sentence, like from one language to the other, and it's very cool. They speak like kind of franglais, as we call it. But if you spend enough time, like enough hours with these people, I I notice them making errors in English, and they're pretty small, and you wouldn't notice them in like 99% of cases, but just like every, like per hour of conversation, you're going to notice like one or two weird things where it's just kind you're just kind of you almost get this like shock. You're like, that was weird. You know what I mean? It's not like a big deal, but like it happens. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's that's why I was saying that it's really, and I catch myself all the time doing that kind of errors in English or German or whatever language. Uh, that's why, like, when you see in movies when there's like this actor who's a spy and this and that, and he's like suddenly like you didn't know, and he speaks like native level Russian, like you're like, get out of here, like this Tom Cruise there speaking Russian. No, no, like it's to speak a language at that level without natives realizing for hours. No, you it's extremely hard unless you've lived there for a very long time, and even then, there'll be some things that you'll say in a weird way.
Hmm. Random question in Basque. Do you guys speak at all ever like a Basque Spanish
Oh
mix?
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We do a lot of that. So Basque, for those who don't know, is the oldest language in Europe, and it's got nothing to do with any other language. It's very, very different. But we do mix a lot of Spanish vocabulary. Well, I mean, after years of influence by the Spanish language, and also we often go back and forth. We speak Basque and then switch to Spanish with certain people, and then come back to Basque again, and or like people living in the Basque country who don't speak Basque fluently, but they like greet you in Basque or like do some small talk in Basque and then switch to Spanish because they feel more comfortable. There's a lot of that going on.
Okay. I guess as we're kind of wrapping up the episode, this may or may not work well. Like, I'm an experiment, but do you want to just hit us with like a mix of Spanish and Basque, like just like mix it hardcore, like mid sentence? So I'll ask you a question in Spanish and just give me like a
Sí,
little.
vale.
I just want to hear it. Honestly, I'm just very curious to hear kind of how it sounds. Entonces, como pues Mikel, ¿qué hiciste hoy? Háblame un poco de tu día hoy en día.
Bueno, pues la verdad es que he pasado todo el día trabajando, he tenido mucho trabajo, he ido a la playa también, vivo al lado de la playa. Y ahora voy a pasar a vasco. Eta zeituko dut. Ez diaztu ezer ulertuko hemendik aurrea. Gainera nire herriko hizkuntza jonenez, nire hizkera. That was Basque. So it's...
Muy bien.
Puedes
Entendí
ver...
nada, entendí nada. Ya puedes como mezclar en la misma frase, como un poco de español, un poco de basque.
Si quieres, bai, hitz egin dezaket pixka bat euskeraz, luego un poco más de castellano, y aldatzen, podemos ir aldatzen un poquito.
It's cool. It sounds like gibberish a bit.
It's a language that sounds very different.
Oh man, like in Montreal, the franglais is like next level. Like it's crazy because they'll use like kind of like street English with like obviously Quebec French is kind of street as well. Be like, mais là, straight up, bro, stick 'em. Là. It's like,
Is that the one you've learned, the Quebec French?
yeah.
Yeah, I think I've tried to speak with people from Quebec once, and it was very, very hard for me to understand. It's very different from France French, right?
Yeah, it takes a bit of time to adjust. Like people when French people come to Quebec, they're not going to understand everything at first. They kind of need they need like a bit of a adaptation period for like a couple weeks just to understand like some basic phrases and words and stuff. But they get it eventually.
It's like more nasal as well, right? And then it's vocabulary different as well.
There's a fair bit of different vocabulary, yeah,
Uh,
definitely, and like slang and stuff.
yeah, it's if you there's another really interesting one, which is Moldova, which is between Romania and Ukraine,
Hmm.
and it was occupied by the Soviet Union. So originally the language there is Romanian, but they speak a very weird Romanian with a Russian accent these days.
Hmm.
So to the point where it's quite hard for Romanians to understand it sometimes.
Interesting. Yeah, so I guess we'll kind of start wrapping up the episode. Language learning is something that's always fascinated me, and I think will continue to fascinate me for the rest of my life. Um, one last question I want to ask you. Another one of the big, I guess, misconception type questions is: do you think it's possible to learn a language to fluency without ever visiting like that a country where that language is spoken. I know, you're kind of an example of that in terms of speaking English, but let's just say someone wanted to learn, English, or sorry, wanted to learn something else that isn't English, like let's just say Arabic or Chinese, something that's pretty hard. Are they kind of like you can sort of maybe set up your environment in a way where you're getting a lot of exposure, maybe get like I don't know, like a Chinese assistant or nanny or something like that, so you can get those hours in. But like, is something like that possible? Is it a waste of time? Would you recommend, maybe just like doing 10 minutes a day? How could someone learn a language where they're not in that country? Or actually, I guess even like a more basic example would be like, for our audience, maybe they're still in the States and they're planning to move to Latin America like 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. Like it's their dream, it's in the future, but it's not here yet. How would you advise someone basically start learning the language while they're abroad before making the move?
It The answer to the first question is definitely yes. It can be done. My recommendation. I mean, I'm not going to give advice to anyone learning Chinese because I've never even tried to learn Chinese, and I don't know how I would approach the writing system. But for languages with the same alphabet, like Spanish, just starting to listen to podcasts on radio every day, watch videos on YouTube with also Spanish subtitles, and start reading online articles on any topic that you're interested in. A lot of reading, a lot of listening, read aloud, and eventually try to start talking to people. But if you read and listen to the language regularly, you will improve, and you will improve quickly. It's not that complicated. The hardest part is pushing yourself to do it consistently until you get the results.
Okay. So kind of just the same as if you were in the country in a way. Like
Yeah,
would you
exactly. That's something I always say. There's nothing in the country that will make you improve faster by breathing it. There's nothing in the air. You improve. Yeah, you improve by using it, by being exposed to it, by reading it, by listening to it, by speaking it. Yeah, you're more likely in the country, but not necessarily. If you live in an expat bubble, you might end up hanging out with other English speakers, and then you work online, and you barely speak any Spanish all day, and that's a recipe for not learning at all. Like,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter how long you stay in the country. So just using it. That's my advice.
Yeah. Do you have any tricks for, or how do you go about kind of forcing people to speak with you, right? Because they must get a little bit annoyed when you're early on in the language. Like let's just say the first, of course, month one, and then up to month three or month six, when you're still pretty bad, you say like hey, quiero practicar, blah blah. Like how do you like get them to endure the conversation and for you mentally to sort of barrel through it?
um, Depends on the language. Some people, for languages that are not that common, native speakers will be really surprised, and they'll be happy that you learn the language. So they'll be really helpful. For languages, like bigger languages like English, French, Spanish, again, we can go back to what we talked about in the beginning: scripts. You prepare the scripts, and you've got a lot you can say, and then you try to use it the best you can. Because yeah, some people will not be helpful, but for the most part, most people are nice, and if they see you trying, they won't really be too judging, or they'll try to be helpful.
Yeah, I feel like people are so anti-conversation these days. They're just kind of like, I gotta go, and maybe you try to like reel them back into the conversation. Be like, espera, tengo una pregunta. and just try to get like a little bit more combo out of it.
I mean, also you also have to have some social skills, right? Like
Yeah, for sure.
if you talk to random people in the street while they're going somewhere or doing something, yeah, maybe. Yeah, but if you talk to people in a bar or something, they should be relatively helpful and friendly.
Yeah, there's another tip. Start drinking more.
Um. Okay. Yeah.
Go to the bar. You ever go to like Duolingo or the language meetups and try to is that like a
Oh,
big part of your thing?
I love those because any kind of international meetup because it's so much fun and yeah, for me it's just I can talk to everyone and everyone thinks I'm really cool, so I can brag a little bit. Yeah, I enjoy those a lot.
Like the ones where sometimes they'll give you like stickers with like the languages you speak and yours is just
No, no, no. Those I've never seen those
oh
actually in
no.
Europe,
Okay.
and I know people. I know they are quite common in Latin America, right?
Yeah, there's an organization called Mundo Lingo.
Yeah.
It's like language meetups, and it's almost like a mini party in a way too, because it's always at a bar and there's like drinks and stuff.
Oh, sounds fun. That sounds fun actually.
Yeah, yeah. So you try to go to language meetups.
I go to any kind of social like if I'm abroad and I'm not with friends, and even if I am with friends, I'm a very social guy. So I just whatever if there's something going on, I'll show up.
Yeah, that's a good tip. It's a good tip. Hi, good. I think we kind of left no stone unturned. Dude, I wanted to get this in somewhere, so I guess we'll make it kind of the last question. Have you met up with any of these like other famous hyperpolyglot guys? Have you gone to any of the polyglot conferences and stuff?
I haven't. No, 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 no. That's a lie. I've met one. So the reason I call myself a hyper polyglot is because I was invited to join the International Association of Hyper Polyglots. So it's not something I made up, right? Um, and we've got a big Telegram group and all that. And there was a guy there not long ago, a Russian guy, who messaged, "Is there anyone in San Sebastian?" And I was like, "Yeah." It was a lot of fun. The guy spoke as many, maybe more languages than I do. Um, and yeah, we went back and forth, spoke a bunch of different languages, went drinking at dinner together. It was a good yeah, it was a good experience.
Sick. Have you tried to get in touch with some of these other guys like Steve Kaufman and there's so many. There's like that Italian guy, I forget his name, on YouTube, and
Lampariello, Luca Lampariello, you mean, right?
yeah, Luca.
Uh, I've talked to Kaufman once about his platform, right? Link, which is really really good. His language learning platform. I always recommend it to everyone. I talked to him about including Basque there, and if he needed me to volunteer and translate some text or something like that. But we ended up not doing anything about it. Maybe we will at some point.
Interesting. Yeah, let me know. Let me know. We'll definitely try to get more of the polyglots on the podcast because I think it's super interesting. But Mikel, thank you for coming on. Definitely cool to get your experience learning languages and some of your philosophies and theories, and kind of test out some theories of my own and see kind of where we agreed and disagreed.
Yeah, that was fun. Thanks for having me.
Super cool. So now we reached that point of the episode where uh, let the audience know how you can get in touch, or they can get in touch with you, and whatever you want to direct them to.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Mikel/hyperpolyglot, and that's about it. You can, if you want coaching, or you want some advice, or you simply want to read some threads on how to learn languages. Yeah, you can find me.
Sweet. So this has been another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Again, our guest today was Mikel Teoria from Natural Language Learning. You guys can check him on YouTube, Twitter, and everything. We'll link it up in the show notes. Mikel, thanks again. It was a fun one.
Yeah, thanks, man.